In this section, we will highlight the ethical considerations of malaria vaccine program introduction in the low and middle income countries. I am Salim. Vaccine program in low and middle income countries. As we all know that malaria is a main contributor of high morbidity and mortality for many years, and there is development of anti-malarial drug resistance, which is actually frustrating. And together with this, for many years with the control measures, now there's a global concern to eliminate and eradicate malaria as a public health problem among children. And it has been shown that children surviving multiple malaria infections become semi-immune against severe malaria later in life, and therefore there is evidence of immune protection following infection. And all these initiated efforts to develop a vaccine for malaria eradication. However, for the vaccine to be effective, it should impact transmission and be able to be integrated within the existing vaccination programs and other public health interventions and used for the benefit for those mostly affected. So the malaria vaccine programs need to be conducted among children living in the endemic areas to prove its efficacy in relation to transmission intensity. Vaccine programs are different from the drug trials. How? The vaccine are actually administered to healthy pediatric population, and the children under 5 years are the targeted population so as to prevent early and severe morbidities associated with this age group. Although the magnitude of risk or harm secondary to the vaccination is small, close follow-up is required as we vaccinate different age groups in the population. And the main goal is to benefit the community rather than the individual at the time of the program. And therefore, all these issues need to be explained to the community involved, and they should understand what they should expect from the trial itself. Conduct of a malaria vaccine trial, participant safety is the #1 priority, and the rule of thumb is always maximize benefit and cause no harm. And the investigators have a role to submit a protocol for ethical approval, and this includes local, institutional, and national review boards for ethical protection of actually the sponsor himself, researcher, and the participant. And the ethical review boards actually should oversee the conduct of the whole trial. Data safety monitoring board should be established, and this board is periodically assessing the scientific and ethical reasons and analyzing the data periodically as the trial is ongoing so that no harm or benefit is compromised throughout the study conduct. For example, if the investigational product or the vaccine causes harm, then the trial will be stopped or terminated before the end of the trial so that not to cause more harm. And also, on the other hand, if it's beneficial, then the benefit should not be compromised to other like children within the population, and therefore the intervention should be given out as soon as possible to save life. Will identify the study monitoring team, the so-called the monitors, and these will regularly visit the site for monitoring of the whole conduct of the trial, and they make sure that the trial is conducted per protocol and following the good clinical and laboratory practices. Before any of the study initiation, the site should be capable to conduct the protocol as required. And this is for safety and efficacy reasons in order to properly evaluate primary and secondary case definition for the endpoint determination or the expected outcomes. Standardization and harmonization of the clinical and laboratory procedures for quality control throughout the study. And this is maintained actually through training, continuous training, and calibration of equipments. The vaccine handling and storage space assessment and distribution chain should be checked before even the start of the study. Standard operating procedures, preparation, and training should be done within the study team, and these include the strategies for recruitment, operations of the vaccine process, the field and clinical team for follow-up of adverse events, including disease surveillance and transmission intensity monitoring throughout the study. Vaccine trials with improved survival or prevention of severe disease as an endpoint are ethically justifiable if the effect of the intervention on prevention of mortality or severe disease are unknown, and the evidence from clinical or early phase clinical studies is required to show that the evidence of protection against the clinical disease itself. And this component has to be explained and discussed with the community and during the consent process. What will that mean if your endpoint is improving survival in terms of mortality and severe disease? That means the level of medical care needs to be improved and standardized within the whole community to observe the effect of the vaccine among those who received the malaria vaccine versus those who did not receive the malaria vaccine. And we should note that this may diminish the incidence of the primary trial endpoint. And also, the sustainability of such improvements at the end of the trial requires additional resources and needs to be discussed within the community and the other stakeholders so that to be maintained at the end of the trial. 6 months after completion of the vaccination for serious adverse events related to the investigational product. And for those who had actually serious adverse events, an additional 6 months after the end of the study is recommended. In high mortality population, actually long-term mortality changes and longer follow-up are desirable. Let's take an experience from the RTSS malaria vaccine trial, the MAL55. This was a phase 3 multi-center efficacy vaccine trial of a GSK biological candidate malaria vaccine, RTSS-AS01E. It was conducted in 11 sites within 7 African malaria endemic countries among infants 6 to 12 weeks of age and older children 5 to 17 months of age at enrollment. And the endpoints for this trial were severe malaria or other severe morbidities and death. Actually, it took 1 calendar year for all sites to be prepared for the trial before the main trial actually began. And this was entitled as a pre-MAL55 project. And the pre-MAL55 project was aiming to strengthen the diagnostic processes and facilities in the emergency rooms and inpatient facilities participating in the phase 3 malaria vaccine trial, which included training of staff development and implementation of diagnostic X-rays in microbiology units, to pilot the algorithm which guided the clinical assessment and investigation of a sick child for its practicality in research hospital setting in order to exclude if this is a case of severe malaria or it's a case of other morbid conditions which mimic severe malaria, and also to support training and standardization of observers on assessment of clinical signs, specifically clinicians, to pilot test the data collection, cleaning and monitoring system, to pilot test the remote data entry system and data cleaning checks and plan. Under the case definitions of severe malaria disease, all case definitions of malaria hospitalizations, pneumonia and sepsis. So for example, in Bagamoyo, the study started in May 2009 and ended in December 2014. The capacity building has been established secondary to the vaccine trial, and the clinical surveillance system has been operating to monitor the disease pattern and mortality. So what were the challenges in the malaria vaccine trial in Bagamoyo specifically? The main challenges included sustainability of the standard clinical care. The malaria vaccine trial came with a very aggressive standard clinical care, which is very difficult to be adopted by the government and be sustained within the community unless further efforts are done to sustain these clinical facilities. And also maintenance of the site, such as, for example, laboratory equipment, X-ray machines, satellite, data and archive space, and all the trained staff involved within that period of a malaria vaccine trial. Loss to follow-up due to migration and infrastructure development within the district, considering the long duration of the study itself. Intensity monitoring, which are important to assess the risk of malaria disease and mortality within the community. And this has ethical implication, considering that the vaccine itself would actually modify the disease epidemiology as a result of the intervention, and also the duration of protection of the vaccine itself, as it has been shown that it has a waning effect, and therefore maybe the immune protection of those who receive the vaccine would go down and actually make them susceptible to severe malaria infections. And also the impact of public health interventions with the vaccine and the change of distribution of the pathogen types within the environment. So the main take-home message is the introduction of malaria vaccine program depends on the burden of the disease, the community perception and involvement in research, capacity building of the conduct of the clinical trial as a platform for research in endemic areas, the availability of competent scientists to lead the program and collaborative partnership, ethical review boards, clinical and laboratory safety evaluation capacity, and data management and archives.